This is an AVNation special. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. Before we get into the reason that we're here, Byron Tarry, I want you to come in here and say hey. Byron Tarry is from a brand new podcast called The Next Question. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Excited to be here, and thanks for your support and all we're doing. We'll get into that as we progress.
Here's what we're doing, and this is the first time we've done this in the 14 years we've been doing AVNation. We are producing one podcast and pushing it out two different ways. Byron has a brand new podcast. This is going to be the first episode, so he's going to ask me some questions, which I am wholly uncomfortable for. And I'm going to ask him questions for the AVNation special side. It's the same audio, but we're going to do it to kind of prime the pump for Byron's podcast. The next part of the Next Question podcast is the name or the organization that Byron has started. I was introduced to Byron and the idea here that the AV industry is lacking AI information and AI direction and AI help a couple of days before ISE 2025 this past February. And before we get into all of that, Byron, I want to start with a very basic question here and give people a foundation. What exactly is NEXXT, the organization, and how does it help just the AV industry?
Well, there's plenty behind that, and I guess we'll cover lots of elements of that. But I guess at its very simplest, the inspiration for this came as you were a part of it. It came from putting 15 industry leaders in a room at the outset of ISE and saying, there's something going on here. There's a transformation afoot, not necessarily AI in itself, but AI is the driver, the enabler of some of this transformation and so on. And yet as an industry, I think we're all struggling. I mean, not even as an industry, everyone is struggling around what this means and how do I go and learn. And I've got this imperative and this pressure to figure out what my path ahead in this new age is. But that's a challenge in the depth and breadth of all of this and so on. And so we sat around in a room, as you all too much remember, and just sort of talked about what is this going to mean and what do we need as an industry. There's all sorts of imperative and need just to survive, and then there's this opportunity to thrive in this moment. And so in the absence of a place and a space to have those conversations, in the absence of some of the tools that we can see ourselves in, not just the infinite cacophony of noise out there in the market around what this AI age is going to mean and what we should be doing, but how do I see people that I trust and respect? How would I see stories that are relevant to my industry and the day job that I have that I can actually go out and apply and do something about? And so really that was the inspiration behind NEXXT, the how we can get into as we progress, but essentially around that journey. And I'll perhaps throw it back to you to the journey you've had in that time as to where do we go and find information that's relevant to us, that gives us enough return on investment that we don't feel like we're wasting our time in a sea of stuff, in many instances, AI-generated slop that's just sort of giving us direction, but not necessarily giving us any sort of actionable things to do and so on. So perhaps we were just talking before we got started here about some of that journey of yours to say, before we answer what NEXXT can and should be, and in part that will be in response to the community and the industry, but what is that journey you faced of having to try and navigate this? You're sitting there and polling the rest of our industry around what this means. So I'm hoping you've got some perspective on that as much as I do.
That's what I do, Byron. I ask really smart people dumb questions and they answer me. I don't answer the questions. It's a fair question though, because every media organization, and the bottom line, that is what AVNation is a media organization, has struggled with AI the last 3 to 4 years. At what level do we use it? Do we use it at all? Full disclosure, yes, we do use it. I use it darn near on a daily basis for various things, everything from outlines to data analytics, because one of the aspects of running a media company is looking at your analytics and trying to make heads and tails of it. And I am not that smart when it comes to numbers, so it helps me with that. Absolutely, it does. But it's the broader question that really drove this for me personally. It is, okay, I know how I'm using it on a daily basis, and I'm self-aware enough to know that we're all egocentric on some level, right? We worry about our problems, our kids, our little bubble. And I started looking outside of my bubble and going, okay, this is how Tim uses it, or this is how AVNation uses AI. How does it impact the industry? And, my first filter was still a bit egocentric. Oh, well, this is how marketing departments can leverage AI, because there's a content, creation aspect of it. Okay, dummy, meaning me. That's fine. That's an easy one. But where else can it be used? And that's where I really valued, first of all, that initial conversation in Barcelona was hearing from other people and other perspectives. There were engineers in that room. There were manufacturers in that room. There were other integrators in that room. Julian Phillips, a gentleman I think the world of and I have an awful lot of respect for, he was writing a book about AI with AI, right? And he's since released that book. He's going to be one of your guests on this podcast. So a little bit. This is going to be a little bit of a tennis match, guys. But back and forth. Back to you. What have you learned in this interim 6 months from those folks and from others that maybe weren't able to be in that room, but you have since connected with and learned how we're applying AI to the AV part?
Yeah, well, look, I guess as the founder of what I'll call a bit of a social enterprise and a community structure that we're trying to build here and so on is much of that journey was exactly the journey I think we're all lacking. I'm no different to you and to everybody else in this proposition that the potential is of AI transformation impacts everything we do, from the internal, just the basics of the way we run a company, just as every other company in the world is facing right now. What does that mean to marketing? What does that mean to the day jobs that I do in terms of perhaps the more tactical and practical stuff? And can I do it better, faster, cheaper, all those sorts of things? And then all the way through to how can I transform the way I'm doing business? What is this going to mean in terms of being able to offer a completely different value proposition? And so I would say most of my learning has come from, I know there's an opportunity and where we all sort of start in that proposition. I know I should be doing something. I know there's need and potential here to dozens, hundreds of stories of practical, applied things, from the very simplest, most tactical and practical stories of to use an example of one of your colleagues, Dave Hatz, and what he's doing in programming and overcoming a friction in this normal process we have lived with for 20 or 30 years of the hero programmer coming in at the 11th hour, work until 2 a.m. in the morning, slamming code, walking out, the meeting runs the next day, hopefully, and then we've got all this sort of legacy of debt in the way that we got there and so on, and using AI to improve not only the way that code is written, but to use GitHub and things like that to bring best practice to the way we're going to manage that and support it and so on in the future. So, there's a very tactical, practical thing, all the way up to much more transformational propositions of foundationally changing business model of these shifts from capex to opex. You're wrapped around technical debt that's going to happen because there's no piece of hardware that I think right now that we could legitimately look a customer in the eye and say that 5-year capex life cycle that they're getting ready to buy it under is really a smart idea and so on. And so that to me is the transformation opportunity. Not that I can stand up on a stage or a podcast and so on and tell everybody what the answer is. In fact, in this open source learning age, it's in fact that collective community that where are the thought leaders, where are the ideators, where are the frontline resources in particular. This is not about corporate boardrooms, innovation and transformation coming from the corporate boardrooms. In fact, our front lines, those programmers or technicians or whatever, are the ones that are closest to the frictions that we can solve here. And they're actually the most digitally native, both generally and in terms of AI. In fact, I saw a stat a while back that was the let's just say the generation that we both exist in, let's not put numbers around it, versus the sort of 18 to 25 generation, that 18 to 25 generation is using AI at twice the volume that we are. Well, that sounds like a pretty good qualification to get them into the front lines of trying to figure out how we can do differently with AI, but not for AI's sake, for the transformation opportunity, for the opportunity of just doing better tomorrow with this whole new set of capabilities that are now at our hands.
One of the things that I've noticed, and again, I have been hanging out with Byron for the last 6-7 months, and this is no fault of any show organizer, but I don't recall any, or if there was an AI program at ISE, I missed it. Let's put it that way. I don't recall seeing one at NAB. The first half of this year, there was not a whole lot of education. There was not a whole lot of information out there, either in programming or anything like that, when it comes to trade shows, things that places we all go, right? That all changed at Infocom. And a little credit certainly to Infocom for them inviting you and a handful of others to help put this on, but that was the first major demonstration, I will say, of AI in the industry. How do you think that came about? How did that exactly happen?
I don't think it's anything specific or individual. I think it's the natural momentum that's occurring. But there is a maturation that is happening right now, and that maturation actually is part of what excites me. And if we step back a little bit into the opportunity of our industry and so on, we are all now progressively getting more and more used to engaging, collaborating on a one-to-one basis with AI. What is it? GPT's up to 700 or 800 million users just themselves. So we're well over 1 billion users of AI on a day-to-day basis across the globe. And so I think we're getting far more familiar and comfortable with that one-to-one collaboration. But let's just challenge ourselves as an industry for a moment and say, if we are the thought leaders around that collaborative workflow, what we do to enable that wonderful human condition of sitting disparate parties with diverse thoughts into a room and starting to ideate and challenge what better looks like, what different looks like, and so on. We are months away from Microsoft releasing its facilitator agent, which is not just a transcriber or a back of house translator and so on, but will actually start to become an active participant in your meeting, in your group meeting. Now let's just extend that out 3, 6, 12 months further and start to think of, why do we bring people into a collaborative environment? Because we want those diverse thoughts. We want expertise that we don't have. We want a collective group that is greater as the whole than the sum of its parts and so on. It's not at all a stretch to start to think that I'll start to bring digital collaborants into the meeting as well. And that's just one use case here obviously in our industry of the meeting and collaboration environment. But when you start to think what that reinvents, what imperative, what opportunity, what leadership mandate do we have to step up and start to say as an industry, we are as qualified, if not more qualified than any other, to step into that space and start to help craft what that looks like. And let's remember, AI is an evolving story here. And so as much as there's fear around it'll rule the world and so on, we collectively as a society, as a community, and at a narrow level as an industry, are the people that have the opportunity to step up and help direct and guide that. And so I do think there's a much bigger story than our own what's in it for me stories of how do I cope on a day-to-day basis and so on. I really do believe that our industry has an opportunity to help guide that direction and help frame what most of us are in this industry not for the millions of dollars, but because there's some other level of passion beyond just selling black boxes and so on. And so I really think that we can all get excited about that opportunity for us to lead in this moment, I guess. And so I think that maturation, to come back to the core of the question, that maturation is naturally going to happen. Certainly I and NEXXT can help play a role and kickstarting that and talking to Avixa and others over the last 6 or 8 months. I'll hope that had some influence, but we're ready for it. I think everyone's desperate for it, and the more that we mature, the more places we're going to find that people step up and say, I've got an opinion, or I've got a forum, a stage for thought leadership to stand up. And that's really at its core, whether that's in structured learning journeys, whether that's in unstructured, which is actually the way most of us work, or whether that's in more formal consultative capacities, which are the sort of three layers of NEXXT, from structured learning to community and creating stages and environments for thought leadership, through to consulting that can now help me take those ideas I've generated and turn them into something tangible. That's the imperative that we all face right now.
You've called NEXXT a movement rather than a company. What exactly does that mean when it comes to putting that into practice?
For a start, I've always been a fan of things like triple bottom line thinking and so on. I got involved in sustainability 20 plus years ago, and as a standalone, I'm passionate about that, but that kind of struggles in its own narrow element. But when you start to look at that collective wider focus of the impact on people, profit, and planet and so on, I think you naturally start to take a bigger picture view. And so I'd been involved in Infocom for the last 20 years before it was even Avixa and so on. So I certainly have a passion for our industry and trying to help and so on. But ultimately, I think in the modern day, that this premise of movements are anchored around whether physical places in some instances, or whether they're now much more digital places. I think as much as at some point I want to make a living out of this and so on, I really do believe that that bigger picture proposition of uniting people, and in a digital age that's never been easier to do, uniting people in a movement, in a greater good than just that sort of personal premise is really important. We've got so many examples where that can have positive value in society. And so I guess the founding premises, I was exploring what the industry needed, and creating this premise of NEXXT was one that was founded on having impact and having a capacity to bring a greater good. And so I guess that's at its core where that movement proposition comes. Now, the question is, can I inspire and incite enough people to want to join that movement? A movement of 1 or 50 or even 100 won't necessarily have the impact that we need. And so that's the hope as we launch NEXXT in the coming months, and the digital platform that will be the anchor, the digital community that will be the anchor to NEXXT. So keep an eye out in the next couple of weeks for the public invitation to the world to come and be a part of that community. Will be a matter of whether others want to jump into all of that, and whether we do indeed see the snowball effect of hundreds, indeed hopefully thousands and thousands of people all wanting to be part of that, stepping up in whatever ways that they want to lead, finding whatever mechanisms that they can learn and or lead, and feeling that they have a place, whether digital or physical, but in this instance a digital place to go to find peers and to travel those journeys that they're looking to travel.
You have a couple of folks that have gone before you when it comes to gathering people together digitally. I am reminded of my friends over at HETMA, right? They've got a really great online platform. Avixa Exchange from keeping this inside the AV world. But you've also got things like Reddit, where you have communities of people who gather around common interests. You've certainly got LinkedIn groups years and years ago. Facebook groups, which I'm certain is still out there. I just not have been on one recently. I take that back. I have gone to the AV install nightmares. I have done that. That one is still entertaining to me and frightening. But when you look at this movement, do you think that the fact that it's already digital, like the idea that we're taking AI, 100% a digital entity here, the fact that it's already digital and we're encouraging people to gather around it again digitally, do you think that makes this process of gathering people together easier? Do you think that makes it a little bit more digestible to people? Like, okay, I'm already online. I'm already using one of the thousands of AI tools anyway. I might as well gather together with other like-minded folks. And, oh, yeah, by the way, this one is not just AI, it's also AV. So that makes it even easier. Do you think that helps with the whole gathering people around it?
Never really thought of it that way, but, and perhaps as a potential consumer of it, I'll flip the thing around to you. But look, the fact is that most of us, certainly in this industry, but even old guys like us, are pretty digitally native these days in terms of a platform. I don't think there's anything particularly groundbreaking about saying let's go to a digital place rather than a physical place to convene. Certainly not in a post-COVID age where the only way we could convene was digitally and so on. What I think the opportunity is, and where I've spent a lot of time thinking about creating this digital community, as if that's indeed the anchor, it better be pretty damn good and compelling. I think we've all lived going to big halls of digital communities where no one speaks and you question whether there's even anyone there.
Yeah, if you've never done this, kids, go look up Second Life. That's what he's talking about right there, Second Life.
Let me say, I'm not totally happy with the platform that we're building at the moment, because it's frankly built on a software platform that was built 5 or 10 years ago, and as many software platforms in any form are trying to bolt AI on now as opposed to build foundationally native. So when we look at what these platforms are built to do, they're built to kind of replace what we do in person. Think of going to an event, you meet someone at the bar and you interact, or you sit in some content that inspires you and you sort of go from there. And so bring that back to a digital community. What I want is something that will actually help bring the needles in the haystack to me, as opposed to the other way around. And so certainly part of the initial vision, but certainly the longer term vision here as well is in creating that return on investment. How can I find correlation between people in that community? Why is it, Tim, that after 30 years, both of us in this industry, we only met 7 months ago? That should be a far more practical process to say, you know what, you and Tim have actually got a whole lot in common, and maybe you should meet, and let's help you find those commonalities. And then on the content, on the things that we're talking about, whether they're professional or even personal, how do we find those correlations and say, here's some content that Tim created the other day that might be of relevance given the sorts of things you're thinking about and talking about and so on. That's my ultimate vision of a digital platform, and I don't think that that's necessarily just related to the fact that the topic is digital. I think that's the same sort of reinvention and transformation that we need to be thinking about in everything that we're doing right now, saying, what are the new opportunities that this capability of AI can bring me to do something different? And so my hope, at least over time, is that community will be powered by the value that it brings through rethinking what a digital community might be, as opposed to, we could have built this on LinkedIn, or we could have built this on Reddit or whatever, but none of those platforms really have that foundation to bring the needle to me. You still have to go hunting pretty hard to find the value, and that's part of the problem in this moment where people are struggling to get that return on investment for the search that they're doing.
I would say that right now it is a good start, right? It's a good place for folks to start sharing ideas, as well as Byron said, content that not just they make, but also content that they find. All of us do some sort of either sending a link via text, via Teams, via Zoom chat, via some sort of communication mechanism. This is another place for them to do that as well. And it becomes kind of a repository, not just for us, but for our connections and for other people that are like-minded when it comes to AI in the industry.
Well, I was going to turn around to you. I mean, obviously I've started to build this vision over time, and I've tested it against lots of people and so on. But let's flip around, not just to you even, but what you're seeing. What is the struggles that you're seeing of people traveling those journeys and so on? Everyone can be an armchair expert, but I think we've already agreed that no one's an expert at this point, and that's the importance of this sort of collective journey we're traveling. But if we go to the problem and not the solution, what are you seeing in terms of the challenges that people are having in finding their place in this moment of uncertainty as the sands are shifting underneath them, and they're sort of trying to figure out, well, what do I do to survive, let alone thrive in this moment? What do you think is missing? What are the struggles that people are looking to try and solve and overcome?
The first thing that is missing is a good let's call it measuring stick or thermometer to assess BS when it comes to AI and AI training. And what I mean by that is there are an awful lot of charlatans, there are an awful lot of snake oil salesmen. I do not care what year it is, I do not care what the technology is, there will always be snake oil salesmen, and they are here inside the world of AI. Be wary. And unfortunately, there's not a great place for folks to go, hey, watch out for this course, or hey, watch out for this consultant, or watch out for this quote unquote expert. That's the first thing I think that we're missing. I think that it has nothing to do with AV or any other industry. I think that overall the AI part, we're missing that ability to say, watch out for this Yahoo over here. The second part is genuine education and showing people a path. I have referenced this interview for the last couple of years, and I will probably reference it for the next few more. But when I interviewed Joe Pham about AI, Joe has been involved in AI for years. Probably one of the first people I knew that was involved in it. Joe Pham, formerly of QSIS. I said, okay, Joe, how do I get started? Where do I go? Because I love learning. I've got classes and courses and stuff I take all the time. That is part of my morning routine is learning something. He's like, well, just start, right? Get on ChatGPT and just start. And for somebody as smart as Joe Pham, that is fine. For somebody like me, that is not a great idea. And I did, right? And I discovered a couple courses along the way, and that's been a great path for me personally, right? And we're all different. We all learn different ways. We're all different types of learners. And I think the third part is practical applications to our day-to-day lives and even to our industry. That is something that, we all look at new technology and new innovations. And let's you and I go back 30 years ago. You and I both saw our first website, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1992 to 1995, probably. That's roughly when I saw mine. And none of us had a grand idea, probably very few of us had a grand idea of how that technology would change our business. And now here we sit 30 years later, and we're recording a podcast over the internet with very high quality audio and very high quality video, and we will post it on the internet. And I think that's where we're at with AI. We're sitting in the early 90s in relation to the internet when it comes to AI. None of us really understand or know how it's going to impact our business. So I think that's also something that we are desperately in need of right now.
So if we step back, and these are some of the inspirations, I guess, but if we step back to even that first proposition, where we tend to go in the absence of being able to, in an immature space and in the absence of being able to necessarily even vet for ourselves where quality will be, we tend to go to those who we trust. We vet for ourselves.
Hang on. We vet for ourselves, and then we end up paying for it. That's the problem.
Well, yes, exactly. And so then when those first experiences are poor, then we step back and kind of go, well, this is all too hard. I'll just sit on the sidelines for a little bit. So, So I think that's part of that trusted premise. That's why hearing from people within the industry, hearing from faces like Tim or Julian or John Sidwick or whatever, faces that we know and trust from the last 10 or 15 years, if we see them at the forefront, then hopefully that's a trusted voice that I can say, okay, well, if Tim says so, then that's probably worth me giving it a shot. So I think that's a starting point. Then a step beyond that, well, maybe I don't know Tim, but the content that he's talking about, the practical applied, not the theoretical, just go out and experiment, but here's something that I did. Here's something that I tried. Here's a place that I went to learn and so on. If I see you look like me, you do the things that I do, you're talking about the tasks that I am struggling with on a day-to-day basis and so on, there's another level of trust there. And so I think that's where that premise of the trusted place for our industry, as opposed to, 1,000 other industries that we could be sort of listening to generic stuff, but that applied, I don't want to hear you should be doing, but not a practical path to, but how and what and where.
The three things you should be doing, Byron. The three things you should be doing.
So, I think that's what my sense is. A lot of the inertia in the industry and a lot of the inertia generally in people is exactly that. I know I should be doing something, but actually the more pressure you put on me to do something, the more paralyzed I become because I don't know where to go and there's no sort of real methodology to follow. And the scale of potential around that transformation tends to paralyze me of I need to start doing something big, as opposed to, one of the things that I talk about a lot is go find something in the most tactical, boring, practical thing that you could do that just takes time, and go and find how you can save half an hour on that. But instead, just as we do with money, instead of just doing more of the doing because I've freed up a half an hour, reinvest that half an hour into getting to the next hour of efficiency. And ultimately, moving forward at the pace of change that we have, we're all going to have to shift a little bit in our mindsets to say there has to be an element, 5-10% of our work lives, that is going to shift to experimentation, that's going to shift to reinvestment. And eventually I can start to pull that money out, as I would in a financial scenario. But for the moment, I've just got to keep doubling down and reinvesting in that time. And once we can get to a point that we can sort of trust advisory as to where we can go and invest that time and get those savings, I think in this rapidly changing and agile world that's going to actually become a foundation to everybody's work strategies. It won't be 100% doing. It'll be 90-10 or 80-20 in terms of having to reinvest time that we've saved into that progress. And that's frankly in part the answer to solving this everyone's going to lose their jobs. Because if all we're doing is facing the efficiency proposition so that people can just do more, we're going to run out of jobs. But if we can actually do as every other industrial revolution has ever done, if we can actually reinvest that and turn that into moving faster, innovating better, transforming, then in fact there'll be plenty of work to go around. It'll just shift the dynamic a little bit.
That guy right there is Byron Tarry. You can find his podcast, The Next Question, on any place you find your podcast. We'll put a link to this on this episode's page. Byron, how do people connect with you in general? How do they find NEXXT online, and how do they get involved?
NEXXT now with two X's, the double X standing for the sort of exponential premise, so NEXXTNOW.com. That's obviously the easy place to find out lots of stuff. LinkedIn, all the usual pathways and so on. And as I said, stay tuned. In the next couple of weeks, you'll hopefully find lots of places espousing this, but our digital community will launch mid-September, and the hope is that will be the snowball that we're hoping it will be, and create that trusted place for you. But not just my content and my suggestions, but a place for you, the collective you, to be able to share your stories, to be able to ask questions and build that momentum in that sort of trusted place and space that I think everyone's looking for.
All right, we'll look forward to it. Also, I am aware, and I sat in on some of these interviews, you are in for a treat because there's some really, really great folks coming down the pipeline on Byron's podcast as well. So you can check him out at NEXXT. For us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others, but go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. That is all the time we have for this AVNation special.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.